The last stragglers were leaving Mariner's Waxworks. The uniformed attendants, glad that another day's work was over, were locking up. On the second floor of the old grey building, the manager, a stout, blond man of smart appearance, was talking to one Raymond Hewson, who looked anything but smart. His clothes, although good once, were showing distinct signs of their owner's losing battle with the world.
There's nothing new in your request. In fact, we refuse it to many people. Young bloods have often made bets, but we don't play ball. We've nothing to gain and something to lose by letting people spend a night in our murderer's den.
A night in the murderer's den. That's what Raymond Hewson, the man in the shabby clothes, was after. Why? You'll find out. The Waxworks. I must earnestly beseech you not to listen to this beyond midnight alone.
Beyond Midnight by Michael McCabe.
No, we certainly have nothing to gain. If I allowed it and let some young idiot lose his senses, what would be my position? But, of course, your being a journalist somehow, that alters the case.
Well, I suppose you mean that journalists have no senses to lose.
No. But one imagines them to be sensible, responsible people. Besides, here we have something to gain. Publicity and advertisement.
Exactly. And there I thought we might come to terms.
Oh, I know what's coming. You want to be paid twice, do you? It used to be said years ago that Madame Tussauds would give a man £100 for sleeping alone in the Chamber of Horrors. And I hope you don't think we've made any such offer. Now, what's your paper?
Well, I'm freelancing at the moment, working on space for 2 or 3 papers. But, well, I don't think I'll have any trouble in getting this story published. Do you? Morning Echo'd use it like a shot. A night with Mariner's murderers. No live paper could turn it down.
How do you propose to treat it?
Well, I'll make it gruesome, of course, but with just a saving touch of humour.
I see. All right, Mr. Hewson. Get your story published in the Echo, and there's a £5 note waiting for you here when you care to come and call for it. I'd like to be sure about you, though. And I'd like you to be sure about yourself. I must confess that I wouldn't spend a night in Murderer's Den. I've seen those figures dressed and undressed. I know all about their process of manufacture. I can walk about in company downstairs as if I were walking among so many skittles. But I'd hate to sleep alone down there amongst them.
Why?
I don't know. There isn't any reason. I mean, I don't believe in ghosts. Even if I did, I'd expect them to haunt the scenes of their crimes or the place where their bodies were laid, not a cellar which just happens to contain their waxwork effigies. It's just that I couldn't sit alone among them all night. They seem to stare so. Well, after all, they do represent the lowest and most appalling forms of humanity. Now, I wouldn't admit this publicly, of course, but the people who come to see our murderers aren't generally charged with the highest motives themselves. No, the whole atmosphere of the place is unpleasant, and if you're susceptible to atmosphere, I warn you, you're in for a very uncomfortable night.
Well, sir, I'm imaginative, I think. I am probably susceptible to atmosphere, as you put it. But it's a good idea, and I've a wife and family to support. Been a bit unlucky lately in the job stakes, you know. And, well, we're living on my savings, which aren't great. But after all, they are only waxworks, aren't they?
You're not superstitious?
No, I don't think so.
But you've just said that you have an imagination. As a journalist, you'd need a reasonably strong one, after all.
The editors I've worked for have often complained I haven't any.
All right. I think the last of the people have gone. Now, wait a minute. I'll give orders that the figures happen to be draped. I'll let the night people know you're going to be there, too. One condition, I'm afraid, I must impose on you. I must ask you not to smoke. We had a fire scare down in the murderer's den this evening. I don't know who gave the alarm, but whoever it was a false one. Fortunately, there weren't very many people down there at the time, or there might have been a panic. All right. A night with Mariner's murderers you want. A night with Mariner's murderers you shall have.
In the passage at the bottom of the stairs were a few preliminary horrors. A rack taken from a medieval castle, relics of the Inquisition, branding irons, thumbscrews. Beyond was the passage into the murderer's den. The Waxworks. Thurtell, the murderer of Weir, stood as if frozen in his diabolical act. Within 5 yards of him sat Mrs. Thompson. There was Lefroy, who killed for gain so that he might ape the gentleman, and Charles Peace, sneering across a gangway at Norman Thorne. Brown and Kennedy, the two most recent additions, stood between Mrs. Dyer and Patrick Mahon.
Oh, now, that's Crippen. I expect you recognize him. Insignificant little beast. Looks as if he couldn't tread on a worm. Oh, there's Armstrong. Looks like a decent, harmless country gentleman, doesn't he? And, of course, who's this? Oh, yes, I was coming to him. He's our star turn. He's the only one of the bunch who hasn't been hanged.
The figure Hewson had indicated was that of a small, slight man, not more than 5 feet in height. It wore little waxed moustaches, large spectacles, and a caped coat. There was something so exaggeratedly French in his appearance that it reminded Hewson of a stage caricature.
Who is he?
That is Dr. Bourdet.
Oh. Well, don't think I've... well, somehow the name's familiar, but I forget...
Well, you'd remember better if you were a Frenchman. For some long while, that man was the terror of Paris. He carried on his work of healing by day and of throat cutting by night, when the fit was on him. He killed for the sheer devilish pleasure it gave him to kill, and always the same way, with a razor. After his last crime, he left a clue behind him which set the police on his track. Now, one clue led to another, and before long they knew they were on the track of the Parisian equivalent of Jack the Ripper. They had enough evidence to send him to the madhouse or the guillotine on a dozen capital charges.
And they caught him then?
No. Our friend was too clever for them, even then. When he realized the net was closing, he just vanished. Disappeared off the face of the earth. Ever since the police of every civilized country have been searching for him.
Oh, where can he have possibly gone to? I mean, with such a hunt on for him.
Oh, there's no doubt about that. Did himself in, obvious. But in such a way that prevented his body coming to light. Now, 1 or 2 crimes of a smaller, though similar nature have taken place since he disappeared, but he's believed to be dead. The experts think the crimes, in a sense, are, the actions of imitators.
Look at his eyes.
Yes, that little figure's a masterpiece. You find the eyes bite into you, don't you?
Sort of, yes.
Well, that's excellent realism, then.
What do you mean?
Mesmerism.
Pardon?
Bourdet practiced mesmerism. He was supposed to mesmerize his victims before dispatching them.
Oh.
Indeed, had he not done so, it's difficult to believe how so small a man could have done his ghastly work.
He's very small, isn't he? Doesn't look very strong or anything.
Well, there were never any signs of a struggle. There's an armchair here for you, Mr. Hewson. It's the best we can do for you, I'm afraid. I hope you'll be able to get some sleep. Mr. Hewson? Mr. Hewson?
You know...
I thought... Yes?
Well, I thought, just then, well, I thought I saw, the doctor, Bourdet, well, silly, but, well, I thought I saw him move. Imagination. Silly, but... Well, I could have sworn just for a second.
You'll have more than one optical illusion before the night's out, I'm afraid. But you won't be locked in. You can come upstairs when you've had enough of it. There are watchmen on the premises, so you'll find company. But don't be alarmed if you hear them moving about. I'm sorry I can't give you any more light, but all the lights are on. For obvious reasons, we keep the place as gloomy as possible.
Yes.
And now I think you better return with me to the office for a tot of whiskey before your night's vigil,
Yes, well, for a start, I don't think we'll have my armchair facing friend Baudet. Yeah, I think I like him a lot less than the others.
The dim, unwavering light fell on the rows of figures, which were so uncannily like human beings that the stillness and the silence seemed unnatural, ghastly even. Hewson missed the sound of breathing, the rustling of clothes, the 101 minute noises one hears when even the deepest silence has fallen upon a crowd. The air was as stagnant as water at the bottom of a standing pool. Not a breath in the chamber to stir a curtain or rustle a hanging drapery or start a shadow.
Must be like this at the bottom of the sea. Have to work that into the story somehow. Like the bottom of the sea. Sinister lot, I must say. Even Armstrong doesn't look quite such a harmless country gentleman now. Still, they're only waxworks.
All would be well, thought Hewson. Yet somehow, what prevented him most of all from feeling absolutely comfortable was the knowledge that Dr. Baudet was directly behind him. He knew, in fact, that the little Frenchman's waxen stare was directed at the back of his neck. He itched with a desire to turn round.
Come on. My nerves have started already. If I turn and look at that dressed-up dummy, it'll be an admission of funk.
It's because you're afraid that you won't turn and look at him.
Rubbish. Not afraid at all.
Yes, you are.
Rot. Complete and utter rot. Afraid? A lot of waxworks.
Not of a lot of waxworks. Just one. Dr. Baudet.
French fool. Not so healthy now, is he?
Look at his eyes.
Don't want to see his eyes.
All the same, he had to eventually have a quick look round at Dr. Baudet.
Only a waxwork like the rest of them. They're all only waxworks.
All the same, he took another quick look behind him. Now, it did not worry Hewson too much, because it was, after all, only his imagination, but there seemed to be a subtle change in the grouping of the figures around Dr. Baudet. Or was it Dr. Baudet himself? Looking to the front of him, he looked at Crippen. Again, he had the slight feeling that something, somewhere, was a bit different. Crippen seemed, for instance, to have turned 1 degree to the left.
Must have moved my chair a bit. Not Crippen. It was me who moved.
And just then, the waxwork of grey moved a hand. At least Hewson thought the hand moved. Just for his own peace of mind, Raymond Hewson gave the waxen figure a little poke. Wax. No more, no less. Lifeless, lifelike wax.
They tell me, the editors, I've no imagination. Better make some notes. Yeah. Deathly silence. figures.
And then he turned suddenly and looked over his right shoulder. He had neither seen nor heard a movement, but it was as if some sixth sense had made him aware of one. He looked straight into the vapid countenance of Lefroy, which smiled vacantly back as if to say,
"It wasn't I."
Of course it wasn't you. Wasn't any of you.
And then he looked back, and Crippen seemed to have shifted his position slightly.
Can't trust that little beggar. Can't trust any of them. Once you take your eyes off them, they move. Not good enough, this isn't. I reckon I'm going. Not going to spend a night with a lot of waxworks who move when you aren't looking at them. No, Hewson, please. They can't move. What are you thinking of?
He encountered the mild, baleful stare of Burdett.
Almost got you that time, Crippen. All the rest of you, too. If I do see one of you move, I'll smash you to pieces. Smash you! Experienced enough already to write my story. 10 stories for that matter. Yeah. Morning Echo. Wouldn't know how long I'd stayed if I cleared out now. As long as the story's good. Yes. That watchman up there. He'd pull my leg all right. And perhaps the manager wouldn't give me the $5 or $2. Find out all right how long I was here from the watchman. Rose will laugh about this, I tell her. You asleep, Rose girl, or awake thinking of me? Can't have Rose laughing at me. Kids will pull my leg too. Yeah. Nothing worse than having someone's breathing. Someone was breathing. Well, it wasn't me. They knew I was listening, and then they stopped. Yeah, yes, they did. Now, this is too much. Bad enough when they move, when I'm not looking. But I'm not having the beggars breathing, too. No, it won't do. I am Raymond Hewson, unsuccessful journalist, but a living and breathing man. And these figures grouped around me are only dummies. Dummies! Yeah. What does it matter if they're lifelike? Wax and sawdust for the entertainment of morbid sightseers and orange-sucking tourists. Ha!
Then the gaze of Dr. Burdett urged, challenged, and finally compelled him to turn.
Huh?
Hewson stared into those dreadful, hypnotic eyes. His own eyes were dilated, and his mouth, at first set into a grin of terror, lifted at the corners into a snarl.
You moved, Blasty. Yes, you did. I saw you. I saw you. What do you mean?
Dr. Burdett's movements were quite leisurely. He stepped off his pedestal with the mincing movements of a lady alighting from a bus.
I need hardly tell you that not until I overheard the conversation between yourself and the worthy manager of this establishment did I suspect that I should have the pleasure of a companion here for the night. You cannot move or speak without my bidding, but you can hear perfectly well. Something tells me that you are, shall I say, nervous? My dear sir, no illusions. I am not one of these contemptible little effigies suddenly come to life. I am Dr. Burdett himself. Pardon me, but Steve, let me explain. Circumstances with which I need not fatigue you have made it desirable that I should live in England. I was close to the building this evening when I saw a policeman regarding me, thought too curiously. I guessed that he intended to follow me and perhaps ask embarrassing questions, so I mingled with the crowd and came in here. Inspiration showed me a certain means of escape. I raised a cry of fire, and when all the fools had rushed to the stairs, I stripped my effigy of the caped coat, which you may all be wearing, donned it, hid my effigy behind the platform at the back there, and took its place on the pedestal. I own I have spent a most fatiguing evening. The world is divided into collectors and non-collectors. The collectors collect anything according to their own individual tastes. I collect throats.
And the doctor regarded Hewson's throat with interest mingled with disfavour.
My activities of late have been curtailed. I am glad, though, of the pleasant opportunity of gratifying my somewhat unusual whim. I should never have selected you from choice, of course. No, I like men with thick necks. Thick red necks. This is a little French razor. The blade, you will observe, is very narrow. It does not cut very deep, but deep enough. In just one little moment, you shall see for yourself. I shall ask you the little civil question of all polite barbers. Does the razor suit you, sir? You will have the goodness to raise your chin a little. Thank you. And a little more, just a little more. Thank you. Merci, monsieur. Merci. Merci.
Over one end of the chamber was a thick skylight of frosted glass, which, by day, let in a few sickly and filtered rays from the floor above. After sunrise, these began to mingle with the subdued light from the electric bulbs, and this mingled illumination added a certain ghastliness to a scene which needed no additional touch of horror. The waxwork figures stood apathetically in their places, waiting to be admired by the crowds who would presently wander fearfully among them. In their midst, in the centre gangway, Hewson sat still, leaning far back in his armchair. His chin was up-tilted, as if he were expecting to receive attention from a barber, and although there was not a scratch upon his throat, nor indeed anywhere upon his whole body, he was cold and quite dead. His previous employers were wrong in having him credited with no imagination. Dr. Baudet, on his pedestal, watched the dead man unemotionally. He did not move, nor was he capable of motion. But then, after all, he was only a waxwork.
Beyond Midnight is presented every Friday night at 9:30. The program is adapted for broadcasting and produced by Michael McKay.